Everybody, welcome to Breakfast All Day. I'm Matt. Christy is here, and Alonso is here. They are going to talk about Alex Gibney's new documentary. Well, it's him and two other people. Made this movie called Totally Under Control, which goes in depth about how much the Trump administration has completely shit the bed on dealing with our current pandemic. I didn't watch it because I just couldn't. I just
It's a
couldn't.
lot.
It's a lot.
I'm mad enough, and I didn't want to have any. Yeah, I just couldn't.
Well, perhaps at some point you'll
Yeah,
feel differently
there's
and want to see
there's
it.
there's just not enough rum in the house.
It is pretty much totally up until last week in
Yeah.
terms of how timely it is. Alex Gibney and his team made this movie secretly over the past 5 months. The title comes from one of the many delusional denials from our president about the state of the White House response to the coronavirus. We have it totally under control, is what he said during one of his interviews. And that's where the title comes from. But as we all know, without having even seen this movie, that is very far from true. So they go back to the beginning. What Alex Gibney does so well, he's so thorough. And quite often you feel like you're cramming for a final exam when you're watching his movies, like you're going to be tested on this at the end, because he throws so much information at you and it's so dense. And that is true here as well. But there is an urgency to it and an emotional connection to it because we are still in the middle of all of this. And even though it's 2+ hours long, it just zips by. And it is totally damning and it is totally thorough and technical. It goes back to the origin of the coronavirus and then what happened step by step. There's like a little timeline that pops up every once in a while that zips along on the bottom of the screen and tells you like what day certain things happened, what days certain news conferences happened, what day, various travel bans occurred and what did or did not happen in response to them. And it is step by step, methodically taking you through the miscommunication, the denial, the sabotage that has occurred from various agencies.
The short-sightedness.
Yeah, among the voices here are Rick Bright, Dr. Rick Bright, who was an initial whistleblower on this, and he testified before the Senate, I want to say, about his experiences. Max Kennedy Jr., who is RFK's grandson, who is a Democrat, 26 years old, is a Democrat, but, got this call from Jared Kushner was out looking for volunteers to help out.
The task force.
It's a whole other wrinkle to it. Like, oh, we're going to try and get stuff privately because there became this scramble. This feels like a lifetime ago. The scramble for ventilators and PPE and other equipment. And the states were competing against each other for it and also competing against FEMA. And then there was this whole other private effort to get equipment. People were like cold calling and like randomly sending emails on their laptops. And that's what Max Kennedy was about. And he was also a whistleblower. And so you have this really wide array of voices within the medical community, within technology, within equipment. This one mask maker, one of the big top mask makers, like broke down crying, during his testimony before Congress because he just got inundated with emails from doctors to moms and everyone in between saying, "What do I do?" It is
after he had spent years trying to get the government to build back up their stores of N95 stuff.
That's the thing, is that so much was already sitting there, and because
and there was a whole department, that was supposed to handle this, but oh no, let's shut that shit down.
They shut it down, and then they insisted that they didn't get any kind of playbook as to what to do during a pandemic, and they did indeed. And really, it goes to the very top. Trump is in total denial. He doesn't want to believe that this thing is as bad as it is. He is fearful about its economic impact and how that in turn impacts his reelection capabilities. It's what you know. I mean, it is all what you know, but it's more of it, and it gets his arms around so much.
Yeah, it's a dense thicket of information, but I think Gibney and his collaborators, Ophelia, Harutyunya, and Suzanne Hillinger, do a really great job of keeping track of who's who, reminding you who's who, telling you what certain acronyms stand for. Although I did have to look up what BARDA was. That one, for some reason.
What is BARDA? That's Eric Bright.
Isn't that like one of the comic book characters that associated with Darcy?
Yeah, it is
Big
not.
BARDA?
Yes, Mr. Miracle's wife. No, it is not in that. In this case, it is. Oh, shoot, I had to look it up. It's anyway, I'll look that up. Anyway.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
A thing that I didn't know about, the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. That's what it is. So that was the office that Dr. Rick Bright worked for. In late 2019, Dr. Rick Bright conducted like a 3 or 4 week pandemic scenario, like, when they do like a fire drill, basically, of here's what would happen and what would that be like. And they found all these weaknesses and problems along the way, created a full report that they hand off to HHS and the CDC. And nobody gives a fuck and nobody does anything about it. That was new to me. I was like, oh, so it wasn't like we got completely caught with our pants down. Somebody had run this scenario just as a matter of course, and they had a whole thing. And then there's also these email chains that go on between people in government and out of government and statisticians and public health people, totally calling what's going to happen, totally pointing out what needs to happen and isn't happening. Like at one point, they play Trump saying, we've never seen anything like this before, over an email that says it's going to be 1918 all over again. Like just stuff like that. It's just so infuriating, this movie. But it's
so what I'm
vital.
hearing is it's not getting caught with your pants down. It's 20 people saying, hey, you need to put some pants on.
Basically,
like, oh, no.
I like being pantsless.
No, we don't need pants. No one's going to notice.
Also, among the people who are interviewed here is Michael Shear from the New York Times. He's a White House correspondent for the New York Times who tested positive for COVID this week himself.
Oh, no, I hadn't heard that.
He's one of the reporters who tested positive. And again, we know that Trump knew, and they include this in the film itself. This is how up to date this film is. That there's the Bob Woodward audio from February, where he was, saying, as part of the many interviews he did for this Bob Woodward book called Rage, that it's a lot worse than we thought it was. It's worse than your severe flu.
It's in the air.
And it's transmitted by the air. He knew all of it in February. And then as it ends, there's a title card that tells you a week after.
No, a day. The day after.
Oh, the day. That's right. That's right. You're right. The day after this was completed, Trump tested positive for COVID. So this is that's how up to the minute this movie is. That a thing from last week has been included in it.
So yeah, I mean, this is a great movie. If you don't think you want to watch it, I get it. We're all just dealing with the simmering pot of shit on a constant basis, so I get it. But I think this is such a vital movie to sort of remind us how we got here so quickly. I'm glad it exists for future generations to see how we got here so quickly, in the hopes that there are future generations. So this is just really, really kind of essential, important journalism, documentary filmmaking. I'm glad it exists. I don't ever want to watch it again.
Among the interesting things, maybe I knew in the vast recesses of my brain on this topic, but a lot of what the problem was that the initial batch of tests that went out were faulty. And then there was this whole conflict between the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and then private labs and university labs in places like University of Washington in Seattle, where that was the first big hub of the disease here in the United States. They had the capabilities and the drive to do their own testing, and they were told that they couldn't. Yeah. And so much of why things went wrong was just the morass of bureaucracy.
The whole hydroxychloroquine thing.
Oh, right. Oh, they interview the Orthodox doctor who was giving hydroxychloroquine to people in his community in New York. And saying, oh, it's fine. And that's why Trump thinks it's fine.
And Fox News mentioning it 80 times a day. You've got the Trump administration silencing anybody who's actually talking about what's really going on over and over again. You have this notion of we just mustn't let it upset the stock market. That's the key thing. Right. And meanwhile, they're also showing, well, here's what South Korea did. here's how South Korea got it right. Here's how South Korea has mostly licked it, even though they've had their occasional spikes. They're like, they had this whole thing with MERS in 2015. There was a public outcry. So now they like had all this stuff ready to go. The government was ready. They had their plan of action. They had all this stuff happening. You see other countries where like now they're starting to reopen, like New Zealand, but we're fucked.
So
yeah, go ahead, Matt.
We talked about this before we recorded it, and like, I'm not watching this because I feel like A, we talk about COVID every week, and then B, there's so much news that's been coming out since it broke, right? And I'm at the point right now where I'm a little burnt out on hearing about it. Also, as we're less than a month out from the election, at this point, it's hard, like when they talk about undecided voters, like, it's like, yeah, sure. And there's unicorns too. Mm-hmm. I find myself thinking, look, like you either, for whatever reason, you're going to vote for Trump or you're not, right? And there's a million reasons why. And I find myself, and this is, I realize I'm being myopic, but I'm not quite sure who this movie's for.
Well, that's the thing. The people who need to see it the most are the ones who will just write it off as fake news. And so they're not going to bother. And I mentioned that in my review at TheWrap, but like, I think that this movie is very not hysterical, and it doesn't feel like it's been made with an axe to grind. It's just very much like this happened. And I think it's, you really would have to do some digging to try and refute it. I think it's pretty straightforward. But again, you're right. The people who most need to hear it are so entrenched and have been sold such an alternate universe bill of goods for so long by the mass media and by their government that, yeah, anything that doesn't go with Trump's, sunshine up his ass propaganda is immediately dismissed as partisan hackery when the opposite is true.
And it literally is sunshine up your ass, because that's one of the therapeutics that Trump was talking about back in April.
Yes.
It would be different if, like, I guess I would feel differently not that, in whatever world this would ever happen, would be like if Gibney partnered with Dsouza and did this same movie, right? Then maybe it gets in front of some of the people that it might make a difference for.
I'm sure Dsouza will be leading the rallying cry this weekend about why this movie is flawed and false. And
he's got his own
biased and blah.
Trump.
I hear you on that. Yeah. No, I hear you on that. The frustration of that.
But you still have to try, like.
And the thing is, because this is Alex Gibney, and because he is so clear-eyed and so methodical, it's so the opposite of like Michael Moore, for example, right?
Sure.
Michael Moore, has his strengths in his own way with his own voice, and he stirs shit up and inserts himself into the action, and that's a broader kind of satirical perspective on things. But this is not that, and I think because of that, it's not as easy to dismiss.
Yeah, you can write off a Michael Moore movie because you write off Michael Moore, but this is different.
Yeah, I guess I would expect a month out from, like, I would expect a Michael Moore, scathing documentary a month before an election. And I'm just a little curious, like, from Gibney, like, why now? Like, because we're certainly not past the tipping point. Well, but like, we're nowhere near the tipping point around, like, things are still getting worse, right? Like, we're not even close to having a handle on this. And so
I think I'll tell you, I think I can answer that question. I think the reason why is because the ongoing shock doctrine of the Trump administration means that every day he says or does something bananas and outrageous and shocking and impeachable, but because he does it every fucking day, nobody can keep up with him, and they just stack up, and you just tune out after a while because you can't deal with it anymore. And so I think it's important that, yeah, we're still in the first less than a year of this thing, but like, hey, let's stop and let's methodically go back and trace where this thing came from, lest it get lost in the swirl of shit of everything else that is currently happening in the world. So I think that's why you do it. And that's why, ideally you put it up for election day in the hopes that there's somebody that can still be reasoned with. But I think that's why you do it when, this is a story that is obviously not anywhere near over.
And this is a movie that is playing this weekend in some drive-thrus I'm sorry, drive-ins rather.
Yeah.
And then on Tuesday it's on VOD, and then I think next Friday maybe it's on
the 23rd.
Hulu.
The 23rd it's on Hulu.
It's on Hulu. Okay, so it's going to be available on various platforms for a while there. So maybe when you're
can we put it on
Hulu,
giant projected screens as people wait in line at polling places
on Trump Tower?
Right. One quick point I want to make, and then we should wrap, is we have a doctor named Tyson Bell who is in Virginia. He's with the University of Virginia. He's like the head of, is he the head of infectious disease there? He's like that he's one of the leaders of the university hospital there. And he's Black, and he has talked about how heart-wrenching it has been for him to continue doing his job when he sees so many Black and Latino people coming through and being hospitalized, and how disproportionately it is affecting people of color. So this film is a good reminder of that as well, the importance of recognizing that.
Yeah, and again, the lack of universal health care and a suitable sort of public health umbrella often leaves communities of color exposed to disease in a much worse way, because they are being robbed of the infrastructure that they should have as far as healthcare goes. So yeah,
well, also the totally galling profiteering also off of the possible medicine that might help, like remdesivir. Apparently, it costs like $10 to make one dose, but it's being sold for $3,000 a piece.
After Gilead got money from the government to invent it in the first place.
It's all maddening. Anyway, I'm saying 9.2.
I said 9.
Okay, so this is 9.1 is our number.
It is. Yeah, check this out. Again, if you don't have a drive-in near you that's showing it, you can start streaming it on Tuesday. And if you want to wait till the 23rd, it will be streaming on Hulu as well. Thank you for watching. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on the social medias at BeFastAllDay on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. We've got tons of exclusive content for our subscribers, including right now recaps of The Vow and Lovecraft Country, and coming soon, season 2 of The Mandalorian. Thanks, you guys. Take care of yourselves and each other. Have a good week. We'll see you next time. Bye.